All right, welcome everyone to Unbored Bible. I'm Gary. Today we're going to be talking about the moon. Really shouldn't exist. The more science looks into it, the weirder our moon gets. The Bible treats it kind of oddly too. It's more than just a rock in the sky. Good recipe blog. We're going to start out with a little bit of history, and we're going to cover some stuff for you that will just kind of sort of set the mood a little bit. So we're going to go through some numbers and some basic setups on the moon stats. Then we're going to get into the weirdness of the moon, and then we'll get into some other aspects as far as how the Bible sees it. We're going to get into the science, the Bible, other religions, and other cultures across the world and how they perceive and or thought of the moon. Romans 1:20 through 21, Psalm 8, 3 through 4. If you'll get those queued up for yourselves so you can go look at them later, we're going to use those in a little while. But first, let's get into some of the basics. All right. So just for our comparison, so our moon is a little bit larger than it's supposed to be. Right? It's not supposed to be as big as it is in relation to the planet that it orbits, right? So if you look at some other moons out there, you'll see that other planets have orbiting moons, but they're not nearly the size in ratio to the planet that they orbit. All right. So as far as and now for us, for our moon. Our moon is about 27% the size of the Earth. So it's about a little over a quarter the size of the Earth. So one of the things that we can do is, if we can look at here, is if we got ourselves a nice little nickel, and then this right in here, if we can get right up in there. There we go. All right. So that's basically it. So this is the Earth, and this is the moon. So you can see how it kind of sort of, it's a pretty big little thing. So anyway, so that's about it. Another odd little thing is it's a rocky moon orbiting a rocky planet. So normally you don't have that. Normally you'll have rocky moons and maybe a gas planet or something of that nature. But generally you don't have the same material that they're both rating. If the moon is here, and we send someone to the moon, we're going to have to aim for where that moon is going to be in a couple of days, right? So it's basically, you're not aiming when you shoot go to the moon. You're not going here, because by the time you get there, it's going to be over here, right? And you'll just keep going, and you don't want that. So if anybody shot any guns or anything like that, basically you're leading, right? So you're leading to where the target is going to be and not where you're currently seeing it. Fun fact, we all do know that we say that the moon does not rotate, but it actually does. So the problem is it just rotates in a different type of way. So if I go back to our little nickel here, so it is rotating. It's going around it's going around us, right? So if I can do overhand here, it is going around in an orbit. It is rotating, but whenever it rotates, it always keeps its face at the Earth. There is a thin atmosphere up there. I know we think of it as in just kind of empty space, but what it actually has is something called an exosphere, and that's basically an atmosphere, but it's really not like an atmosphere. It's just minimal of an atmosphere. If, for lack of a better term, for a layman term, it's not a whole lot. There is some natural glass out there, so you wouldn't think of that. You think of this dusty, rocky moon. There's actually glass out there, and I think some of it's from the impacts that it took out there. The Earth is actually moving away from us about an inch per year. So basically, it's eventually we get our little stuff out here. So basically, it just is slowly going away from us, right? So it's going to take a while, but that's an inch per year. So it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but you keep doing that, it's like a dripping faucet. It just keeps dripping and dripping and dripping, and the water bill keeps getting higher and higher. So the crust of the moon is both it's uneven. Unlike the Earth is pretty even as far as the depth of the crust. On the near side, the side that we see, it's about 43 miles deep, the crust, and then on the back side, the far side, it is about 93 miles deep. So it's kind of sort of, it may be a ball, but it's not perfectly formed on the inside. So it's got some weirdness to it. It does have, we have earthquakes. It has moonquakes. So we've actually got seismic activity up there, and we're monitoring it. And the moon does have earthquakes. It is making earthquakes. The moon does have moonquakes, and it's just like here on Earth. It just kind of rumbles and tumbles and does whatnot. So it's not very big, but it's still, there's something moving up there. The temperature swings from roughly about 260 degrees Fahrenheit down to 280 degrees Fahrenheit in total darkness. So it gets super hot down to super cold when there's full light and or it's completely covered in darkness. So it's not like that all the time. It's just wherever it's at in its phase and how much sunlight is hitting it directly or not hitting it directly. There actually is water on the moon. Both the Indian and the Indian Space Agency, and then our own NASA has detected water on the moon. It's not like generally liquid water unless the sun hits it, but it's mostly just kind of sort of crystallized water. And it's not like you walk around and you're like, oh, there it is. But you have to actually dig into it and get your microscopes out and you can find some water. Another fun fact is the moon's core is proportionally smaller than other terrestrial bodies. So its inner core, generally, there's a size ratio for the size of whatever your planet or moon or rock, wherever you are. Generally, your core is going to be a particular proportional size. The moon's is smaller than it should be. It should be a little bit bigger according to its size. All right, so where did we get the name Moon? So this just comes off of the interweb, so this may not be exact, but this is pretty close from what I've been able to pull up. So the origin of the word moon comes from the Old English mona, which is basically turns into Proto-Germanic, which is Proto-Germanic, Menyon, or Proto-Indo-European, mensis, sounds familiar, or meaning month. So we use the moon to track our months. You'll see some of that in the Bible when they're learning how to keep track of time as far as when to do certain celebrations. You'll notice it talks about the moon phases and not necessarily the sun's phase. And the reason is that the moon is more consistent with its rotating in our skies than the sun is, because of our wobble and all that weird stuff. So that's pretty much why the Hebrews were told to use the moon as far as a guidepost for seasons and whatnot, as opposed to the sun. They did both solar and lunar calendars, but their main ones that they really wanted to remain accurate on was the lunar calendar, lunar cycle. 4 main theories on how the moon got formed scientifically, of course. Now this is all stuff like outside the Bible. Even then the Bible doesn't say how it was made. But there's basically, the moon's got some weirdness. So one of them is capture theory, which is basically the moon was this little rock flying around, and then all of a sudden comes up to the Earth and gets inside its gravitational well and just stays with us, right? So that's one thing, is basically just kind of it captured it, got caught in our gravity. So, and then of course we got the accretion hypothesis, which is the moon and the Earth were formed out of similar substances because they were nearby each other, and they just basically formed in about the same time. And then they were just, whatever material was there, that's kind of what they formed. And so then it's almost a 2 planetary system, but it's basically, you're looking at, they formed at basically about the same time. Some people think the moon formed a little bit older first, before the Earth really did, and then the Earth came into its gravitational forces, and then they just kind of sort of locked and got in there. But anyway, depending on which way you want to go and how you want to date it, the moon could be a little bit older than the Earth. All right, you got fission theory, was that they were both in one giant glob of material, and it was spinning so fast that a little bit of it came off, and so then we got stuff that the Earth became, and then the stuff that the moon became. So it's similar to the accretion hypothesis, but basically they instead of being material that just kind of formed together in a similar location, as opposed to just one that was spinning so fast that part of it just kind of glopped off and then became the moon, or vice versa. And then, of course, you got giant impact theory, which is basically while the Earth was in a particular state, something comes in and another planet, another giant rock, they're not exactly sure. I'm sure they've got some name out there. But they basically, it collides, there's enough liquid, whatever, and we spin off, and one of them becomes the moon, the rest becomes us. All right, hope that's not too boring for you, but we got to get some of that out of the way, because the moon, we just don't know how it really formed. We just don't have a really good idea. We got some good guesses, but I think something wrong with all four of them. They've all got something wrong with them that kind of takes the moon, what we actually know, and what we're guessing as far as how it formed. So it's basically each one of those theories, capture theory, accretion, fission, and giant impact, all have their own problems, and they have problems that prevent them from being a complete theory. They're like, hey, we're really certain we know how this thing happened, and neither one of those four really complete the gap for scientists to agree on it anyway. Now for the weird stuff. Most moons in our solar system are oddly shaped, more like random rocks, or think of like a potato compared to a basketball, right? Or a tennis ball. A potato compared to a tennis ball, one of them is all jagged and rockety and whatnot. And there's no real, it's kind of amorphous state. It's just kind of a weird looking rock. There's very few that are round. Roughly about 20 moons in our solar system are round. It is pretty unique. We can't really see outside the solar system to check on other moons and see how that relates to anything. But in our own solar system, only about 20 moons are actually round. And ours is one of them right there. And then if you think about it, the moon actually isn't even round entirely. It's not like a basketball. It actually has, if you take that out, it kind of has a little bit of a bow on it. So you think of like a teardrop, not quite that, but it's not really round. It's more kind of an oblong. So what we're looking at is the round side of the moon, but on the back side, it kind of lobs down a little bit, kind of creates like a tail, but it's more oblong than the side that we're looking at. Think of if you're looking at a raindrop from the belly position, and that little round part, that's what we're looking at now. You go to the backside, it's not going to look like a teardrop, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's more oblong than it is round as far as the way that we perceive it. Here's some fun parts. So the craters are all, majority of them, we'll say about like 70% of them are about the same depth. There's some exceptions. Some are a little bit deeper, some are a little bit more, a little shallower, but it all depends on what hit it, how fast it was going, what angle it hit at, all that other fun stuff. But 70% of them are within I want to say 1 meter to 2 meters in depth. It's but there's some that are like about a mile or so. Don't quote me on that, but there's a couple of deep ones in there. But majority of them fit in roughly a couple of meters deep, which is kind of surprising given the fact that you've got large objects that hit that thing, and we'll talk about that, one of those in a little bit here. But you've got some, no matter how big the object was, it pretty much kept the same level of impact. Now the depth, the breadth of the impact is pretty massive depending on the size of the object, but the moon is so, we'll say, solid on the surface that whatever hit it hard and it just vaporized. So they call that, what do they call it? Hypervelocity. So when something is going so super fast that it actually, and depending on the angle, even if it hits at a certain angle, it won't give you that splash. It'll just vaporize right there. And that's why we see so many round cratered craters. Pretty similar. You would think that if there would be more angular attacks, but for some reason, there was a lot more hyper velocity impacts on the moon than what we see on the Earth today. All right, so NASA's drill. So when we sent some people up there, they got out a drill because they're going to do some drilling and get some samples. They had a little trouble with their own rock drill. It was, I think, don't quote me, I think they even broke a drill, or it took a while for the drill to actually get into the rock so we could take samples. Moon rocks that we brought back were slightly magnetized, and our prediction was that they wouldn't. Scientific predictions were that they would not be magnetized, because you got all this other scientific mumbo jumbo that we're not going to get into today. But a lot of what we thought about the moon kind of changed as soon as we got there. So, and brought stuff back. Some of the rocks contain brass, mica, titanium, and Neptunium 237. And Neptunium very much in nature. It happens, but it's just really, really odd, like really, 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 really rare. And yet we found it up there on the moon. All right, and then there is a large chunk of metal at the south pole of the moon. I say metal. There's a big old chunk through their scientific surveying and whatnot. They found a bunch of metal. It was roughly 2.4 quadrillion tons of metal at basically on the lower side of the south pole of the moon. NASA crashed one of its parts of its rocket and just kind of let it fall down and just kind of crash down into the moon to see what would happen. And sure enough, what they said was it rang like a bell for about an hour. So what does that mean? That basically means it vibrated. The whole moon vibrated for a little while. So it little echoey. So they did it twice. And one time it was for 3 hours. The second one, I think, it did that for 3 hours. So I guess it depends on where you drop your rocket. But anyway, so what that tells us is that there's something wrong. There's something different about the moon's structure. It doesn't mean the moon is hollow. It just means that the moon might be a little bit more porous on the inside than we think. You could think of something like air gaps or caverns. Density of the rock not as much in some places where it will travel through faster as opposed to hitting a solid rock. It may not shake very much or vibrate very much, but if it's softer rock, it might go through that. So anyway, that's kind of one of the weird part about the moons, because you would have thought that it was basically some almost solid rock, but it was apparently not. So the moon ignores Earth's axial tilt. So basically we don't spin in one, everything's north type of thing. Our north is actually tilted a little bit, so we actually are rotating kind of at an angle, right? So normally what that means is we'll get our little P out here. So basically, so we're tilting, if I can get this right here. So we're tilting, you would think that it would follow that tilt, which most moons do, but for us, but ours actually stays what they call elliptical. It stays normal. Even though we are normally, planet would be like that, we're tilting, and our moon stays going like that no matter what we're doing, right? You would think that the gravitational pull, that the moon would look straight into our center core, which is what most everything rotates on for the most part, as far as like other moons and whatnot. They are locked into the center of the planet that are orbiting. Ours doesn't quite do that. Ours only goes down about 1,000 miles, and our core is about 3,000 miles deep inside. From the outer edge to the center, it's about 3,000 miles. All right. Also, going back to kind of the hollowness. So there's, even before technology, there's some ancient tribes that actually thought that the moon was hollow. Going back to what we found was, why does it ring like a bell? Because it's not as dense and thick as we thought it was. And yet these ancient tribes described the moon as hollow and inhabited by gods or peoples. So they thought that was another planet. They couldn't see anybody moving around up there, but they had this idea that this moon was, for some reason, hollow and people could live inside of it. So there's lots of conspiracies and theories and whatnot that go out there. We're not going to talk about a whole lot of them, but we might talk about the Nazi base that's up there. We're not too sure about it just yet. They just haven't come back yet. So I'm kidding. All right. So, but either way, so ancient tribes thought the moon was hollow. Certain scientists thought the moon was hollow. And then, of course, certain religions think angels, demons, spirits that are living in there as well. And they only come out and whatnot. They're just kind of like their home. So let's look at let's go to Romans 1:20 through 21. God's invisible qualities, eternal power and divine nature are seen clearly in creation, leaving people without excuse, right? So essentially what you're looking at is The moon doesn't fit our basic models. The moon, science-wise, keeps getting weirder, and we don't fully understand it. And the more we dig into it, the weirder it gets. And science just basically, they've got theories. They've got as many theories going around there as the conspiracy theorists, right? They don't quite understand it. We do keep looking at it, but we just keep going. We find something, we ask more questions, right? And then theology does the same thing, right? So how many of the theologies that we just got done talking about had the theology that the moon is some type of a spacecraft, home base, or something for a spirit that gets housed in there, or I want to say in one religion, when you die here, your spirit goes there. So lots of theology, but either way, what we're discovering is currently that we haven't found anybody up there, and we haven't found any doors as far as I know. Psalm 8, 3 through 4. Looking at the heavens, the moons, and the stars, and marveling that God is mindful of mankind at all. Think about what we just went through with all that data as far as our moon is kind of odd. It orbits in a weird way. It doesn't follow our equator. It doesn't follow the center of our planet. It doesn't follow. It's tidally locked, but that's not too unique, but it is different than most moons. Most moons that are round are tidally locked, but any other type of moon that is not round is not tidally locked. They're up there rotating. But you should look at that, and what we're looking at is we should look at the moon and go, why is it there? It's kind of crazy. We all know about Genesis, and it's going to be a light. And we now know that it's not actually light, it's reflecting. But as far as what it actually is trying to accomplish, it does what it's supposed to do, and that is to project that light back to us at night. So quibble if you want about the moon being a light, that's fine, but either way, it gives us that light. The fun part about the moon is the reason we can see it is because it's in the darkness. How many stars can you see during the day, right? So during the day, we're doing all this stuff. We don't think about the stars. All we have is the sun, the cloud, and that's pretty much it. Ancient peoples. Then at night, that's when you can see the stars. That's when you start doing all the mapping and constellations and whatnot. And one of the things that's easiest to look at was the moon. Especially if you got some good eyesight, you can see an awful lot. Especially when that moon comes close, you can see an awful lot. The night sky should be basically looking at it for both people, scientific, religious, or otherwise, should be looking at the moon, and it should give you a clue, right? And especially now that science has gone up there and they've started exploring more, it should be telling us as Christians that, hey, there is something really unique about the moon and the earth, and we should pay attention because God says there's something unique about the moon and the earth, let alone in Genesis and then all throughout the Old Testament. You look at people worshiping the moon. Why? What is so captivating about the moon that God says don't worship the moon? You can look at it, you can study it, you can use it for your clock, if you will, but don't worship it. Where are some of the warnings, right? I'll just put these up here in a little bit here, but Psalm 19, 1 through 6, Exodus 20, 3 through 4, Deuteronomy 4:19, Deuteronomy 17:3, Zephaniah 1:5, and Jeremiah 8:2. God really doesn't want you to worship the moon at all. You can use it as a tool to guide your time clock and to navigate at night, which is totally fine, but it's a tool. It's not something you're supposed to worship. So now here's something a little bit different that I'll say on this is when it's talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars, those are also euphemisms for angelic beings, both demonic, angelic, neutral, spirits, ghosts, whatever. Anything of the unseen realm is going to be, these are euphemisms for these deities and or demons who are who left their own station and came back down to Earth. So basically there's somebody who was in control of the moon and probably came down and started taking worship. So what does that mean that they were in charge of the moon? I have no idea. All I know is I can read the Old Testament, and it talks about these spirit beings were supposed to be in charge of certain aspects of creation. And you'll see that here on earth as well. The Bible talks about not worshiping the gods of and this and that. Those gods are, so like the god of the harvest, god of the rain, god of the storm, god of whatever. So I will say that those were real deities, real spirits, but finally got removed from service when Christ came, and he came down and took them all out and said, y'all ain't doing your job, you're coming with me. So, and basically you're being arrested, right? So we can get into that later, but for right now, we're still going on along the moons, and the Bible definitely, God says, don't worship, use it as a tool, don't worship the tool. If you want to take the stance that the moon and the stars are, when they're referenced in the Old Testament, that the moon, stars, and the sun are referenced only as the moon, the literal stars, and the literal sun, you're going to have a little bit of a hard time with some of the understanding of what did the ancients, when they wrote that stuff, what were they thinking, why, and for what reasons. And this is global. This isn't just like local to the Hebrews or the ancient Near East. This is global in scope. And they also referenced moon people coming down, star people. You'll see that across the globe as well. So here's something for you. I'll put these pictures up. So if there is nothing above us, no creatures, no nothing descends from way up on high, then why would, have you ever heard of the Nazca lines? Nazca is basically, it's either a giant art project over a massive amount of time and created in such a way that they didn't really fade away. There was a hoax a little while down in Australia, but the person who hoaxed it they built it, and then next thing you know, the land started fading away and it was just going to go away. But the Nazca lines are something that we can use an example of, that if you can only see it from the air, why would you do it? And it's not even talking about like if you go up on a mountain and you look down and you go, oh, that's where we need to go, that we need to go that direction. They're not directional like that. They're not pointing at things like, hey, they're not saying like the hummingbird isn't pointing north by northwest to this particular society or mountain. As far as we know, there's none of that. But why would you do that if something from above us couldn't see it, right? So it's kind of weird, and we'll look at some of the, I'll list off some other ones here. I'll kind of list them. You got the Nazca lines, you got the Paracas candelabra over in Peru, you got the Atacama giant in Chile, the Blythe intaglios in California, Arizona, you got the effigy mounds in Iowa, you got the Uffington white horse, which is over in England, you got the CERN Abbas giant and Longman of Wilmington over in England, you've got the steppe glyphs of Kazakhstan, and the works of the old men over in Jordan and Saudi Arabia. So these are a global issue, and they're ancient, and they were here before we had airplanes, and they were here before we even knew we were there, right? So something is going on that these people were creating artwork or communication or something of that nature to somebody who comes down from above, right? Weird stuff. The moon and creation account. The creation order is basically, it's the earth was formless and void, and then we have light, and then we get water separated, and then land appears, and then vegetation, and then some more lights again, and then some more lights again, and then the rest of creation. That's in Genesis 1, right? So lights and creation, so it's part of the light creation process. It's one of the last ones. That is, depending on how you want to look at it. Genesis could either be literal day by day, or it could be block thinking, where you only talk about this particular subject, even though this subject and this subject are coinciding with each other. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were built in one particular area. So they could have been built at different times, And what the author of Genesis is doing is basically putting together the block thinking of the order of creation. All right, so we already talked about the moon's name, which basically comes from mensis, which means monthly. All right, so that thing comes around, it's pretty accurate. Months and the telling of time, numbers 10:10. Trumpets are blown at appointed feasts and at the start of each month as a reminder. Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, basically. All right, so basically what you got going on here is the moon kind of waxes and wanes. So basically the moon goes from crescent to full moon to crescent, and then kind of depending on the time of year, it disappears and it starts all over again. So what was happening was this observance of time, if you want to look up Leviticus 23 through 25, we get instructions for how to use the nighttime tool. Numbers 29:1, additional instructions for offerings on the day of trumpet blasts, which is the new moon, on the 7th month, Tishri, of the Jewish calendar, known as the hidden day, because what's happening is we don't have an exact start time. It's real close, but it's within a few days. But what's happening is the moon kind of sort of doesn't show up, and then when it starts to come back and show its first crescent, that's when the new month starts, is when you can actually see it. It's not like us where we're like our days just continue on one after the other. So they didn't have a time clock like what we do, where we have literal minutes and hours and time and days that are in succession. So they went by months, and their month started when they could see the new moon, right? Especially we're dealing with the 7th month. So that hidden day, it could be a day, it could be 2 days. It's uncertain. So what they would do is they would post people up there to watch for the moon. Then so they do evening and morning as their day, and then so you'll look at that, and that's how the hidden day is referenced in Jesus' time, that no man knows the day or the hour. So basically he's hinting at, you're gonna have to keep an eye out, you're gonna have to watch, because you'll see the signs, and then the last sign of the fading moon, and will it be the next day? Will it be 2 days? It could be a little while before that new moon shows up, and you have to be alert and paying attention. So that's kind of sort of useful tool right there. All right, so and it couldn't be just one person at dusk and waiting to see if they can see the moon. One way to just like wait for it, and then all of a sudden it's raining and storming that night, and nobody's going to be able to see that, hey, today's the new day. So they've got systems in there to counteract weather. Let's look at the moon as a positive symbol, right? So right now, we've kind of looked at it as in don't worship it, don't do anything. All right. So let's look at it in a series of verses. And again, I'll put those up here. So you got Psalm 72, 5 through 7, the moon's endurance, the psalmist's hope for a long righteous reign. Psalm 89, 37, Psalm 121, 6, Genesis 37, 9, Psalm 148, 3, 1 Corinthians 15, 41, Colossians 2, 16 through 17. Let's kind of sort of bring it all together. It's not actually about the moon. It's about what we do with the wonder of the moon, right? So it's a great and marvelous tool to use, and the fact that it's there in its current size and the way it operates should make you wonder. Scientists should look up at it and wonder and go, this is a geographical oddity, right? It's 2 weeks from everywhere. So scientists, instead of saying, hey, this is odd, scientifically this shouldn't be here, this shouldn't be this size, it shouldn't rotate like this, it shouldn't rotate off center, it should rotate off of our equator type of thing. But basically, they're not. They just keep looking. They just, oh, well, that's weird. And then they keep moving on, right? We either glorify the Creator or exchange the truth for a lie. So scientists and other people are looking at the moon going, yep, that's a pretty cool looking little rock. And the rest of us are saying, yeah, it's pretty unique. It's not supposed to be there. It's part of why we're here, because God made a special, unique creation and stuck it right there. And that should throw you for a loop as far as the more data you have, the more you look at it and go, yeah, that's not supposed to happen. It's a sign in place on purpose so that people do not have an excuse. So this isn't the only potential clue out there for mankind. But when the Bible says that nature has been clearly seen to show that there's a designer out there and someone who's in control and can make things work despite the basic rules of operation. So that should at least make you look at it and say, well, what's happening here? And who knows? It might be that God would look at us and go, well, I was kind of hoping you would ask. Let me explain something to you, right? So anyway, that's all I got for you for right now. I'm sorry if I'm rambling on too long. I'll try and edit some of this down, and I'll get you some graphics up there, and we'll see how well this goes on. Help you see the moon in a different light. So other than that, appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.